Well, hello everyone. I'm Pinky Brand with IQ, and welcome to another edition of the IQ podcast and video blog. And today I'm really honored to have as our guest the CEO and founder of Lexsynergy, Mr. Daniel Greenberg. I think the last time we actually met was face-to-face was like in ICANN Barcelona like a couple of years ago. And you know, of course, due to the pandemic, it's really difficult for us all to get together, but it's fantastic to be able to at least talk to you virtually today.
Yes, it is. And it has been a while. I think we've all been cooped up in our places. So it's nice to see you face to face, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, same here. And just, for our audience, tell us a little about yourself. And first off, how did you get involved in the brand protection area and the domain name industry?
Well, I qualified as a South African attorney many moons ago. I think it's about over 20 years ago. And I specialized in trademarks and copyright. And that eventually spawned off into domain names. And then I left South Africa, moved over to the UK, became a UK solicitor, requalified. And my practice was primarily in the domain name industry. I was managing domain names on an ad hoc basis for some trademark clients that wanted domain names to complement their trademarks. And then I was using a corporate registrar, which is one of our competitors now. And I noticed that when I went onto their portal, that the information that was being displayed on their portal and what was actually on the who is did not match. They were putting different information. So while I thought our clients' domain names were maintained in the correct way, because your trademark and your domain name owners should match up. So I decided that maybe we could do a better job of it, break it down, disrupt the market a bit. So that's when I came up with Lexsynergy. And Lexsynergy in itself, Lex means law, and synergy is a combination of the law, IP, and technology, putting that together to try and maintain and manage domain name portfolios and enforce our clients' rights online. So obviously with a legal background, we built up a brand protection team as well as domain name management. So our company kind of offers two services. On the one side, it's a brand protection where we take down phishing websites, any type of website that infringes copyright or trademarks, social media pages. Also, we handle that, UDRP complaints to recover domain names, various complaints around the world in TLD operators, and then the domain name management side. So we're one of the most accredited registrars in the world. We focus on the more complex countries as well, the countries that no one wants to deal with. We handle those, so we manage those. So it's kind of a bit of a synopsis of my background and how it fits into Lexsynergy.
Yeah, that's how I myself originally got involved in this industry, was really on kind of an interest in I'm not a lawyer, but just registering domain names, in these really hard to figure out country code top level domains, around the world, back when there was no way of really even knowing how to even contact them to find out their registration policies and so forth. I hope it wasn't one of my old companies that was the competitor that had the wrong information.
It wasn't. So you're safe. But I do recall with a com where you had to fill out a form, fax it to I think it was Network Solutions, which was the only registrar at the time. You had to get signatures in place. Also, I remember dealing with some countries where they only accepted applications by fax, and then the fax got lost and you had to submit proof. So it was quite different then. Now I think there's a lot more automation. Our lives are a lot simpler, but there's still a few countries that are a bit behind in that respect.
Yeah, it definitely has evolved, since those days. I'm dating myself, but yeah, it's certainly evolved. There's a lot more information that's available now, I think, to consumers, to brands, to everyone, including ourselves. Quite a bit perhaps less complicated, but still, even if you are managing a brand or you're managing trademarks and you're trying to watch all that on the internet, and it's still, there's a lot to to keep up with and to understand, the latest trends and around the internet, right? And to that end, I was looking on your site, which congratulations, I saw you've done a nice new refresh on the Lexsynergy site. Looks really nice, like the new logo.
Okay, thanks.
But I did notice, some posts that you had done on African TLDs, and that's an area that has interested me because there has been difficulty in registering there, but I think it's also an often overlooked area of domain name registration, perhaps, and even brand protection. So I was wondering if you could give us some insight there into what you're learning about what's going on with the various African country code top level domains and so forth.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in Africa, and that's our speciality. I'm South African, so growing up in South Africa, had a lot of exposure to the African market, dealing with African trademarks. And Africa has come a long way in recent years. There's still a lot more that can be done. I have a few stats that I'd like to rattle off, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Because just to understand the scope of what you're dealing with, when people deal with Africa, people normally, for instance, if I meet someone being South African, they'll say, do you know my friend XYZ? He lives in Nigeria. And I would say, well, the distance between the two countries is significant. It's a massive continent. When you're looking at Africa, there's about 1.3 billion people that speak over 1,500 languages. Now, that is obviously a lot of people, a lot of potential. However, in certain countries, the internet hasn't had the penetration it should have. So on average, they say Africa has about 39% internet penetration, which is very low. Right. When you compare it to Europe, that has about 87%. But then it is skewed within Africa, where you've got a country like Kenya, who has 85% internet penetration. And then you've got a country like Madagascar that has about 10%, and Eritrea with 6.9%. So when you get these vastly different percentages, there's obviously, on average, it's relatively low, but some countries are quite high. And that actually reflects in the domain industry itself. The ones that have high internet penetration have more domains registered. So you look at South Africa. South Africa has a relatively high internet penetration, and they've got over 1 million registrations. That's co.za. Then you look at other African countries. Nigeria, they're building up on their numbers. So that's building up over a period of time. Kenya, Tanzania as well, .ke and .tz for those countries. However, for some reason, I think the local market, they don't trust their local TLDs. I think it may be an infrastructure issue. They tend to lean towards .com and certain generic top-level domains. When you look at .africa, for instance, if the population is 1.3 billion, only 30,000 .africa domain names have been registered, which is extremely low. And the majority of those, in my experience, are brand owners internationally securing their brands within Africa. So they're thinking, it's difficult to register a domain name in Ghana or Mauritania. Let us get .africa instead, or something along those lines. Then you look at the South African TLDs, Joburg, Durban, and Cape Town. Combined, I think they have under 7,000 domain names, and South Africa has a population of 60 million. So you're dealing with such big numbers, but it seems as if there hasn't been this grasp or this uptake of the CCTLDs. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think it also fits in line with the brand protection element, where people only really invest in intellectual property and protect their trademarks where they know there are enforcement mechanisms. So if there's no, say, IP laws in a certain country, you won't promote your brand there because if something goes wrong, there'll be no avenue for you to enforce your rights. Right. So I think as these domain name registries develop domain name policies and or mechanisms to recover domain names, I think then that will create that element of trust for people to increase their registrations. Because a lot of the African registry operators don't have dispute resolution procedures. And in that article, I think that you read on our website about West African TLDs, there are a lot of them that kind of are abused. Some that are quite prominent are the ones managed by Freenom. Freenom, I'm not too sure if you're familiar with them, but they have a deal with a few African countries. So that's .ga, that's .ml for Mali, there's Gabon, Central African Republic. And essentially those domain names are free for anyone to really register. So it does happen that a lot of people register. There could be some abuse there. And there aren't really mechanisms available, or there are, but it's not in the format that we know from a UDRP type of enforcement, where there's a formal complaint that you can prepare to recover those domains. If you want to have the domain name secured in your own name, then you do pay a fee. But if you just want to register a free domain name, they are available. So there's quite a lot to talk about within that, within those African CCTLDs.
Thanks for all those comments. It's really quite illuminating, the insight there. I was thinking that perhaps I didn't think about the infrastructure part of that equation, because at least in my own mind, I was thinking about the restrictive policies of some of the CCTLDs, that, you know, the restrictions themselves might lead to more registration in .com or other generic, you know, TLDs that don't have the same maybe local presence restrictions and all that sort of thing. But yeah, that was a thought I had in the back of my mind was, you know, is it infrastructure, or is there something else that's driving or not driving, you know?
I think you raise a very good point with local presence. We do see that it is sometimes an obstacle, and you know, if you're obviously a local entity, then there's no issue in that. But if you're a foreign entity wanting to enter into the country, and you don't have that local presence set up, it can be an obstacle to you securing it. So it does cause a few issues, and that's still prominent in a few of the African countries.
Yeah, I was running a report on our abusestats.com site on the different TLDs, some of these French West African TLDs that you just mentioned, like Mali, for instance, which I think is .ml, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that comes up at the top of the list in terms of the most abuse on from our reporting sources there. And I noticed at least quite a bit of, at least in aggregate across some of the TLDs, phishing is about 27% of the reporting there. And then botnets was not high, but there was still quite a bit of activity there as well. So as you were saying, there's really not any way in terms of enforcement mechanisms, in terms of like UDRP or other dispute resolution in terms of domain registration versus abuse, which is the CCTLDs are not overseen like the new GTLDs are by ICANN, where there's reporting requirements and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think, you know, having a brief glance at your report, I think it kind of highlights exactly the issues that are being faced in that region. So, for instance, Mali, as I was explaining, that it's free for anyone to register. But then what happens is the whois reflects the registry operator as the owner of the domain. If you want to be recorded as the owner of the domain, you have to pay for that service. So the people that are paying for that service, normally brand owners and obviously legitimate business owners. But because it's free, a lot of these scams come out of these countries that you mentioned and that are visible on your report. And what I tend to advise international companies is at least register an identical matching version in those regions, because it's a bit difficult when you contact an American company and you say, please register your domain name in Mali. They'll say, well, where's that? And why should I? I don't even have trademarks in Mali. And you'll say, well, because a lot of issues do originate from there, as your abuse report shows. So rather incur the cost of a couple of dollars, secure that. And when I mean secure a domain, I mean an identical matching. I don't mean go crazy with variations and misspellings. And then that will at least mitigate your risk with someone setting up an identical domain for phishing or other fraudulent purposes. Another TLD that's I'm in the process of writing an article about is .cm. That's for Cameroon, and that is a common misspelling for com. So it just takes a person to miss out the O or not see it in the browser, and you're somewhere else. And I think that is extremely high risk. And like you were saying, there's no dispute resolution process. Sometimes the registry gets involved and there's informal mediation, but there's no formal process in most of the countries. South Africa has one, Kenya has one, Tanzania as well. So they're slowly developing, but others don't. So it's very important to be sometimes proactive rather than reactive, because there's very little case law on domain names in most of the jurisdictions there. And also, I think because the registration numbers are quite low, that means there's a lot more real estate within the African namespaces, within the various TLDs. So if you are a major brand, there will come a time where you may deal with the African market, and you want to make sure that you have at least secured your brand at the first available opportunity. A lot of the brands that we deal with come into Africa quite late and then realize that the domain name has been snapped up for a number of years. And then you've got an issue with prior rights. The person could have registered a company name, maybe filed a trademark in the country. We see a lot of that with acronyms. So you could, have an acronym like HBO, and the person can call, it could be the Hyena Broadcasting Organization, or so some random name to justify a registration.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite important, depending what type of mark you have, to also make sure that you are proactive in that space. Because there are some well-known marks that have become generic over a period of time, and you want to make sure that you secure them as a domain name.
Yeah, that's some good advice. What do you see as any kind of sort of evolving trends in the marketplace, specifically in Africa?
Well, I do see more of an uptake internationally with brands securing domain names. I do think within the market, they are trying to automate a lot more of the registry operators. So when we gain accreditations in the various African countries, we go for the countries that have the automation first. And then, we do service or do work with the ones that are more manual, but it obviously allows us to promote them easier. If someone registers a domain name, they want the domain name registered instantly. If we go back to someone that says it's going to take a couple of days to register your domain name, they'll say, well, surely if you're dealing with the business online, it should happen online, but it's not always the case. Right. So more and more of these TLD operators are coming online. Recent countries are like Mauritania.mr. That's actually a nice extension because obviously it's an acronym for Mr. Yes. So that's quite a popular one. And that I think it's been around for about 2 or 3 years from an automated perspective. So I do think that there's a lot of potential. Ghana's looking at an accreditation model that should be launched hopefully in the next couple of years. So they are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that's interesting about the basically automation or adding EVP, some type of way of making it easier for registrars and just end users to register, especially if the domain is unrestricted. That would be an indicator. It would seem to me that it's time to if you're haven't taken a really serious look at some of these TLDs, then perhaps you should, because that does. I mean, it's just clear over time that, to me at least when a TLD becomes unrestricted and you add the automation part, you don't need a carrier pigeon to send documents back and forth to register. Then that would indicate that, okay, things are kind of becoming 21st century at this TLD. Maybe we need to take a look.
That's right, and I think I think these registries are learning that that does increase the numbers, and they have to have a sustainable model to make their TLD viable. So you find the ones that have the automation, have the accreditation model where they allow for registrars and resellers. You find that the numbers do reflect their structure. So the ones that have it do see the domains coming in, and the ones that don't, their numbers are extremely low. In some of the African countries, the domain names could be in the hundreds, if not thousands. While for a registry, as you know, it should be in the hundreds of thousands, or if not millions, depending on population size. So I think there's a lot of scope. Also, what we've noticed, and I touched on that .cm issue, is that there was quite an interesting situation we had, where it was a UK company. I won't mention names for various reasons, but they had a CM dispute. So what they did is they referred it to their trademark lawyers in the UK. They then realized, okay, that's Africa, so let us refer it to our African law firm, the correspondent firm that we have in Africa, which is based in South Africa. So they approached the South African law firm. The South African law firm looked at it and said, okay, well, we have to pass it on to our agent in Cameroon. So they passed it on to the agent in Cameroon, who then referred the matter to us, and we're based in the UK, which is just down the road from where the complaint originally started. So it made this entire loop around the world eventually to us. And what that highlights is that a lot of people don't know how to deal with the disputes in the region. And although we're there to support, and we do recover a lot of these domains, it's educating the IP community of the various processes and procedures that are out there, and where to go should you have such an issue. Because obviously with lawyers' fees and all these agents involved, you're paying so much that it may, I would say, demotivate you to enforce your brand online. But if it was cheaper, you could go direct, and it was more cost effective, then you'd be more proactive. So I think that has a role to play to make it more streamlined and cheaper for brands to enforce their rights online.
Interesting. Do you have any I guess feelers out there from brands and their appetite to basically get their own top-level domain? We've seen that in the last round, and then we've seen some of the brands abandon some of their TLDs, and some actually change hands. Yes,
yes, we've been in touch with a few brands ourselves that are interested in the second round. They've observed the first round, they've seen what works, what doesn't work. And I think in the second round, it's more of an educated applicant, as opposed to the first one, where people were a bit worried, is it a defensive registration? Are we actually going to use it? And I think a lot of the brands that are interested now are the ones that have shorter names that are more appealing for a top-level domain, so it isn't too long to enter in the URL. And also from a security perspective, wanting to control their own environment, because the risks of infringements and phishing and that in Africa is far greater. If you control the environment and educate the people about that, I think there could be a lot of value sitting in those new GTLDs. So I think there's definite interest in the African region for that.
Yeah, that's some really wise comments I think you have there about why the brands might be interested now. I think that that definitely is evolving from the experience learned from the first round, but so much is also happening just generally on the internet with everything from ransomware, and all these other cybersecurity related matters. So I can see how that might be pushing some brands to really want to sort of control their environment a little bit more.
Yes, and also I think a lot of the brands that are spread over several African countries, for them to maintain these large domain name portfolios and a constant message can be a bit difficult. There are lots of different languages, as I mentioned in the beginning. So when you kind of control your own environment in your own TLD, I think it gives them a lot more flexibility dealing cross-border. So I think that it will be quite a useful tool for, I'd say, large-scale African brands.
Any prediction as to when you think the new round of second round will come about?
I don't know. All I can say is that I had a full mop of hair when it started, and this is where I'm at the moment. So I think maybe 2 years, people are saying. I don't know what you've heard, but I would think maybe 2023 might be the year.
2 years, yeah. I think it's been, I mean, joking aside, but I mean, yeah, it seems like for the last several years, we've been saying it's 2 years away.
Yes.
I guess I'll believe it when I see it, but
Sure.
I sense there is interest. I believe there
Mm.
is genuine interest, in a second round. But we'll just see if the parties that need to get their acts together do that, so that we
Yes.
have a clear roadmap as to where we're all going.
I do sense that a lot of the new GTLD consultancies are gathering pace at this time. So I think there is an inkling that maybe we're nearer than where we were maybe a year or so ago. But I think you have to keep the motivation up, because you need the buy-in from these brands, and the longer you keep people on a piece of string, it's hard to motivate them to actually go through with it. So it would be better if they shortened that time period.
All kidding aside, I do sense that there has been some movement legitimately, in the right direction. And I would also believe that it is important to see some sort of a roadmap, because if not, there's possible, technology, all sorts of things can happen in a short time frame that could push someone to a different alternative way of wanting to communicate with customers and potential customers. And what I mean is not via domain names. I mean, we all need domain names to technically to make things work, but I guess I mean in terms of identifiers.
Yes, no, exactly. I agree with you.
Well, Daniel, thank you very much for your comments today on the TLDs and in Africa. It was really some interesting insight that I definitely learned some things today, and I hope the audience did. And if the audience has any questions, I'm sure that they can contact you over at lexsynergy.com. And we will look forward to hearing more from you in the future about African TLDs. And I certainly hope to be able to see you in person sometime soon, somewhere.
Yes, hopefully soon. And thanks a lot. I enjoyed the chat.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thanks.